Close your eyes and try to imagine the vast, honestly incomprehensible expanse of our planet's entire history. We're talking from a lifeless, fiery ball of lava all the way to the brilliant, glowing world of city lights we know today. Now imagine taking that entire 4.5 billion-year saga and just neatly compressing it into a single day and night, a standard 24-hour clock. It's a totally mind-bending journey, so let's explore it together. Think about the sheer scale of this idea for a minute. If our Earth was officially born at the exact stroke of midnight, at what time do you think the mighty T-Rex finally let out its first roar? Was it at noon? Maybe dinner time? And honestly, even more hauntingly, at what exact moment during those 24 hours did humanity actually step onto the stage? The answer might genuinely send shivers down your spine, but we are going to save that incredible reveal for the very end. So, to truly grasp this immense scale, we need to establish the ruthless math of our countdown clock. Every single hour that passes represents roughly 187 million actual years. That means for every minute you're sitting there tapping your foot, the planet ages 3 million years. And with every single tick of the second hand, bam, 52,000 years of history flash by. Entire mountain ranges rise and fall, and supercontinents literally submerge in a matter of seconds. Let's see how our planet's very early morning unfolds. At exactly midnight, the Hadean eon begins, and there was no solid ground here. It was just a boiling, toxic magma ocean sitting at around 2,000 degrees Celsius. It was a literal slaughterhouse. But as the clock ticks forward toward 4 a.m., the planet starts to gradually cool down. Millions of years of relentless rain pour down from these heavily saturated clouds, finally extinguishing the hellfire and forming our vast, murky primordial oceans. Actually, scratch that. Right before those oceans fully formed, at exactly 12:10 a.m., we hit an event of truly apocalyptic proportions. A wandering Mars-sized planet named Theia smashed right into Earth. The energy released was billions of times greater than the strongest atomic bomb. But, ironically, this destruction was the absolute greatest gift to our future. All that vaporized debris eventually coalesced to form our moon, and the moon's gravity acts like this giant cosmic anchor, stabilizing our axial tilt. Without it, our climate would wildly fluctuate, and complex life probably never would have existed. Moving into an incredibly slow afternoon on our clock, life remains mostly stagnant. Just single-celled stuff hiding out down in deep ocean vents. But at exactly 1 p.m., something revolutionary happens. Microscopic blue-green algae, known as cyanobacteria, swim to the surface and invent an absolutely unprecedented biological machine, photosynthesis. They start turning sunlight directly into food. It's a total game changer. However, nature has a pretty dark sense of irony, doesn't it? Every industrial plant produces waste, and for cyanobacteria, that waste was oxygen. And this perfectly illustrates the danger of that specific era. At 1 p.m., oxygen was a highly toxic reactive acid to the anaerobic life that existed at the time. So by pumping billions of tons of it into the ocean, they sparked the Great Oxygenation Event. It was a horrific mass extinction where early life basically slaughtered its own kind just by breathing. And the consequences definitely didn't stop with the oceans. The excess oxygen flooded the atmosphere and completely destroyed the methane blanket that had been keeping Earth warm. By 2 p.m., global temperatures plummeted to minus 50 degrees Celsius. We entered Snowball Earth, a deadly, silent, icy prison literally miles thick. But Earth's fiery core eventually fought back. Deep-sea supervolcanoes awakened, tearing through the ice and pumping massive amounts of CO2 into the air. This created a greenhouse effect that finally melted the ice and rescued the planet. After all that ice thawed, we entered an era geologists quite literally call the boring billion. But beneath that calm surface, the endosymbiotic theory was quietly playing out. At some random moment, a giant predator bacterium devoured a smaller one. But instead of digesting it, this miraculous system error occurred. The small bacterium survived inside, functioning like a tireless little power plant, utilizing oxygen. This eventually became mitochondria, giving birth to the complex cells that make up every animal, plant, and human today. The difference between these next two eras is just staggering. At 8:30 p.m., multicellular organisms finally formed the Ediacaran period. Think of it like a garden of absolute serenity. Soft creatures with no mouths simply absorbing nutrients from the water. No fangs, no bloodshed. But then, at 9:04 p.m., the Cambrian explosion absolutely shattered that peace. Some creature realized it was way easier to tear apart its neighbor than to wait for scraps. Predation was invented. And this triggered a bloody, hyper-fast arms race, bringing about hard shells, complex legs, eyes, and terrifying apex predators like the Anomalocaris. With all that going on, the oceans were getting incredibly dangerous. But by 9:52 p.m., the atmospheric oxygen had finally created the ozone layer, which acted as a much-needed protective shield against deadly UV radiation. So the absolutely crucial point here is that life could now confidently crawl out of the water. Moss and fungi created the first soil, arthropods dragged their armor onto dry land, and lobe-finned fish bravely stretched their necks to gulp their very first breaths of air. Welcome to 10:30 p.m., the Carboniferous period. At this point, our terrestrial world was covered in dense, dark, tropical swamp forests. But here's the crazy part. Bacteria hadn't yet evolved the ability to decompose dead wood. So when ancient giant trees fell, they didn't rot. They just piled up, endlessly trapping carbon underground. This pushed atmospheric oxygen levels up to a staggering 35%. And this oxygen doping totally shattered the size limits for insects, creating a sci-fi nightmare of hawk-sized dragonflies and 2.5-meter-long millipedes. Yeah, no thanks. But of course, that bizarre prosperity couldn't last. At 10:40 p.m., nature hits the ultimate reset button with what's known as the Great Dying. Over in Siberia, an ocean of mantle magma erupted relentlessly for 1 million years. Trillions of tons of CO2 caused the oceans to nearly boil and lose all their oxygen. Anaerobic bacteria basically exploded in population, tinting the oceans this toxic pinkish-purple hue and releasing deadly gas into the air. It was an apocalyptic domino effect that wiped out 96% of marine species and 70% of land animals. Yet from the ashes of that immense graveyard, massive ecological gaps opened up. The stage was finally completely cleared for the true kings of Earth. At 10:56 p.m., the Mesozoic era begins. For an hour and a half on our clock, which is about 160 million years, a biological empire of dinosaurs ruled completely and unconditionally, right up until their sudden end at 11:39 p.m. And these Mesozoic titans possessed a sort of mythical authority. You had sauropods acting as 100-ton walking mountains on land. Up in the sky, you had pterosaurs with wingspans the size of an F-16 fighter jet. Down in the seas, 15-meter mosasaurs swallowing sharks whole. And the absolute pinnacle of it all? The T-Rex, a perfectly adapted killing machine with jaws designed to literally crush solid bone with tens of thousands of newtons of force. But pure dominance means absolutely nothing against cosmic bad luck. At exactly 11:39 p.m., a 10-kilometer asteroid struck the Gulf of Mexico, traveling at 70,000 kilometers per hour. The impact was brutally swift. Everything within a 1,500-kilometer radius was instantly vaporized. Vaporized rock shot up into space and rained back down as glowing glass, turning the global sky into a giant oven that ignited forests worldwide. The thick ash then blocked out the sun, bringing on a harsh nuclear winter that entirely severed the food chain and starved the survivors. So when the dust finally settled, why did those giant tyrants fall while we eventually survived? Well, it really came down to sheer adaptability. Dinosaurs required massive amounts of calories and just couldn't survive the freezing darkness. But our ancestors, these tiny, humble, shrew-like mammals, they survived on scraps and buried insects. They were warm-blooded with insulating fur. And most importantly, mothers nourished their young with breast milk when the environment offered absolutely nothing. Ultimately, humility and motherly love triumphed over sheer brute strength. Let's move ahead to 11:45 p.m. With the dinosaurs out of the picture, mammals explode in diversity, filling every single ecological gap. But the truly defining moment happens at 11:58 p.m. Tectonic shifts cause African forests to shrink into vast, open savannas. Our primate ancestors lost their trees and were forced into a desperate move. They stood upright on two legs just to see over the tall grass. This effectively freed their hands to use tools. By 11:59 p.m., they master fire, cooking meat to provide the massive calories needed to fuel their rapidly expanding brains.
The clock is ticking relentlessly now. It is exactly 11:59 and 58 seconds p.m. With just 2 seconds left on the entire 24-hour clock of Earth's history, humanity officially steps onto the stage. We endure brutal ice ages, we migrate across continents, and we use our cunning intelligence and our ability to unite to climb to the absolute top of the global food chain.
But hold your breath for a second, because here is the central, absolutely mind-blowing fact of this entire explainer. Everything you know about the word history happens in the final 1/10 of a second. Every history book you've ever read, every great empire, every incredible discovery, all of it occupies literally the length of the blink of an eye on our cosmic clock. Just think about the frantic, chaotic speed of human advancement. In that single, tiny fraction of a second, we invented agriculture and writing. We built the pyramids in the Roman Empire. We powered through the Industrial Revolution using steam and electricity. We fought brutal world wars, we actually escaped Earth's gravity to land on the moon, and we connected billions of brains through the internet. It is a sheer lightning strike of evolution that profoundly changed the entire planet almost instantly. Which brings us to the end of our day, and leaves us with a really provocative, somewhat haunting question. We have become a true force of nature, altering the Earth's surface and atmosphere faster than any asteroid or supervolcano ever did. So the biggest question now isn't where we came from, but where we are going. Will we be wise enough to protect this fragile blue home of ours, or will we just become a thin layer of fossils waiting to be excavated in a few billion years? The clock of the new day has already begun, and the future is being written by our choices today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.